HOA shut down my garage sale, so I started hosting free events that ruined their business. You may have seen my story go viral last year, how I was physically assaulted in front of my kids over a garage sale, and how our neighborhood united to take down a corrupt HOA president. But what happened next is even more shocking. Just when we thought we'd won, Barbara Mitchell returned with powerful corporate allies ready to destroy everything we built. This time, they're not just targeting me. They're coming for every homeowner in Pinecrest Estates with millions in lawsuits, false criminal charges, and a scheme to seize control of our entire neighborhood. If you missed my first video, let me catch you up. I was knocked to the ground by our power-hungry HOA president Barbara Mitchell, all because I dared to have a garage sale without her permission. My kids watched in tears as this entitled Karen physically assaulted me on my own driveway. But instead of giving up, I found a brilliant loophole in the HOA rules. We organized educational events that were completely legal, exposed Barbara's secret consignment business that was stealing from neighbors, and ultimately forced her to flee in disgrace as her entire corrupt empire collapsed. It's been exactly 1 year since Barbara listed her house and fled Pinecrest Estates in disgrace. Our community has never been stronger. The monthly skill-sharing events have become the highlight of everyone's calendar. Kids play freely in front yards that once had to meet Barbara's impossible standards. Neighbors chat over property lines that once seemed like fortress walls. Last weekend, we celebrated our community's transformation with our biggest event yet, a neighborhood anniversary party marking 1 year of freedom from Barbara's reign of terror. Everyone was there. Tom Wilson, our new HOA president, Mrs. Chen, who now runs our community garden, even the family who bought Barbara's old house. We were laughing, sharing food, and enjoying the perfect spring weather when I noticed a sleek black SUV parked just outside our neighborhood entrance. A woman in designer sunglasses was watching us through a telephoto lens. Something about her seemed familiar, but before I could point her out to Tom, she drove away. I should have known then that our troubles weren't over. I should have recognized the warning signs. The email arrived Monday morning. Notice of legal action against Pinecrest Estates Homeowners Association. At first, I thought it was spam, but Tom Wilson called an emergency meeting that night. The message was real. Barbara was back, not alone, but with a team of lawyers and the backing of Platinum Living, the largest property management company in the state. They were claiming our community events violated commercial zoning laws and threatening to sue every homeowner individually for damages to Barbara's business. But that wasn't all. Platinum Living had quietly purchased 3 foreclosed properties in our neighborhood and was filing for majority control rights based on an obscure clause in our original HOA charter. If successful, they would dissolve our elected board and install their own corporate management team, with Barbara Mitchell returning as special community advisor. Everything we'd built was suddenly at risk, and this time, educational events and neighborhood gatherings wouldn't be enough to save us. This wasn't just about garage sales anymore. This was war. The emergency meeting that night was chaos. Neighbors packed into Tom Wilson's living room, voices rising in panic as he explained the legal threat. Barbara's lawsuit claimed $2.5 million in damages for coordinated community action, resulting in loss of business and reputation. Even worse, Platinum Living's paperwork seemed legitimate. The obscure clause they'd found gave any entity owning multiple properties special voting rights during transitions of board leadership. But that's ridiculous. Mrs. Chen stood up, her normally gentle voice sharp with indignation. We followed every rule. We documented everything. Tom nodded grimly. Their argument is that we deliberately targeted Barbara's business by creating competing events designed to undermine her consignment operation. That's not what happened, I insisted, standing up. We just wanted to build community. The fact that her business suffered was because people discovered she was using HOA violations as leverage to get consignments. Linda Peterson from the county records office raised her hand. The problem is, intent matters in these cases. If they can convince a judge that our primary motivation was harming her business rather than community building, we could all be liable. Heavy silence fell over the room. We had worked so hard, been so careful to stay within the rules. Now it seemed Barbara had found a way to use the legal system against us, just as she'd once used HOA regulations. "There's something else," Tom said quietly. "Platinum Living isn't just any property management company. They specialize in acquiring HOAs in desirable neighborhoods, then drastically increasing fees while cutting services. They've done this in 5 communities across the state already." Someone in the back called out, "Why would anyone let them take over?" "Because most people don't fight back," Tom explained. "They use legal intimidation, selective enforcement of rules and corporate resources to exhaust any resistance. By the time homeowners realize what's happening, it's too late." My stomach turned as I realized this wasn't just Barbara's revenge. It was a corporate takeover disguised as a personal vendetta. Platinum Living wanted our increasingly valuable neighborhood, and Barbara had given them the perfect way in. As the meeting broke up, people left in worried clusters, their earlier confidence shattered. Tom, Linda, Mrs. Chen, and I stayed behind to form an emergency response committee. We needed a plan, fast. "We have 2 weeks before the hearing on their takeover attempt," Linda explained, "and 30 days to respond to the lawsuit." "We need a lawyer," Mrs. Chen said firmly. Tom shook his head. "I already called 3. None will take our case against Platinum Living. They're too powerful, with too many connections to local judges." I thought about my family, about Emma and Jake, who had finally stopped having nightmares about Barbara shoving me to the ground. About Lily, whose medical bills had finally stabilized, thanks to the community support network we'd built. About our neighbors who had become true friends over the past year. I couldn't let Platinum Living destroy all that. "If we can't fight them legally, we need to fight them at their own game," I said slowly, an idea forming. "Barbara used the rules against us until we found better rules to use against her. We need to do the same thing with Platinum Living." The why? Next morning, I called in sick to work and drove to the county clerk's office. If Platinum Living could find an obscure clause in our HOA charter, maybe we could find something they had missed. 6 hours later, bleary-eyed from reading legal documents, I found nothing helpful. But as I was leaving, defeated, I bumped into Carlos Mendez, a city planner I'd met at one of our community events. He recognized my distress and invited me for coffee. "Platinum Living." He nodded knowingly when I explained our situation. "They're notorious at City Hall, always pushing the boundaries of zoning laws, always finding loopholes." "So there's nothing we can do?" I asked, despair creeping into my voice. Carlos leaned forward. "I didn't say that. Their tactics work because they count on communities being disorganized and uninformed. Your neighborhood is different. You've already proven that." He pulled out his phone and showed me something I hadn't considered. The city's new community development overlay zone program. Any neighborhood that demonstrated sufficient community engagement and improvement initiatives could apply for special zoning protection that would override certain HOA authorities. The deadline for applications is in 2 weeks, Carlos explained, but you need to show significant community impact, documented events, improvement projects, social initiatives. I felt hope stirring. "We've been doing all that for a year," Carlos smiled. "Then document it. Every event, every testimonial, every improvement in property values or quality of life." The committee loves before and after stories. That night, our emergency committee divided tasks. Tom would gather financial evidence showing our HOA's improved management. Linda would compile property value data and crime statistics showing neighborhood improvement. Mrs. Chen would collect testimonials from residents. And I would document every community event we'd held, creating a comprehensive portfolio of our transformation. For the next week, we worked around the clock. During the day, we'd go to our regular jobs. At night, we'd compile evidence, prepare our application, and quietly inform trusted neighbors about our plan. We had to work carefully. If Platinum Living discovered what we were doing, they might accelerate their takeover timeline. Then something unexpected happened. Barbara herself showed up at my door. She looked different. The perfect blonde hair was the same, but her eyes were tired, her designer clothes slightly less immaculate. For a moment, we just stared at each other, remembering our last confrontation. "A year ago, Barbara," I said, not inviting her in. "Mike," she replied, her voice lacking its old confidence. "Can we talk?" Against my better judgment, I let her inside. My kids were at school, Lily at work. It was just the two of us at the kitchen table where this had all started a year ago with that fateful reading of the HOA covenant. "I'm not here for Platinum Living," she said immediately, surprising me. "I'm here to warn you about them." I didn't bother hiding my skepticism. "You're suing us alongside them." She shook her head. "That's not my choice. When my business failed, I borrowed money from Edward Granger, Platinum's CEO. He's using my situation to get control of Pinecrest. Once they take over, my debt is forgiven." "Why are you telling me this?" Barbara looked down at her manicured hands. "I've seen what they did to Willow Creek Estates. My sister lives there. After Platinum took over, fees tripled. When residents complained, selective enforcement began. Anyone who fought back found themselves buried in violation notices and fines. Within 6 months, 12 families were forced to sell at massive losses. Platinum's subsidiary real estate company bought the properties and flipped them for huge profits. "And you agreed to help them do this to us?" I couldn't keep the disgust from my voice. "I was angry," she admitted. "When I left here, I lost everything, my business, my reputation. Granger offered me a way back. But..." She hesitated. "I didn't know they would go after everyone. I thought they just wanted to remove the new board." I studied her face, looking for deception. "Why should I believe you?" She reached into her purse and pulled out a flash drive. "Because I recorded Granger explaining their entire strategy. How they target neighborhoods, how they pressure homeowners, how they manipulate property values. He didn't know I was recording." I took the drive, still suspicious. "This could be a trap." Barbara stood up. "It's not. What I did last year was wrong. I was protecting my business, but I went too far. What Platinum is doing is something else. Entirely. It's systematic exploitation. They don't care about community, they only see profit margins." As she walked to the door, she paused. "I made Pinecrest my personal kingdom, and it was wrong. But at least I lived here. I was part of this place. To Platinum, you're all just numbers on a spreadsheet." After she left, I immediately called the committee. We met at Tom's house and cautiously reviewed the files on the flash drive. They contained everything Barbara had promised: recordings, internal documents, emails outlining Platinum's predatory practices across multiple communities. If authentic, it was damning evidence. "We can't trust her," Tom insisted. "This could be manufactured evidence to lead us down the wrong path. Or it could be exactly what we need," Linda countered. "If these documents are real, we could take them to the district attorney." Mrs. Chen, always the wisest among us, suggested a compromise. "We continue with our overlay zone application while quietly verifying these documents. If they're real, we'll have 2 weapons instead of 1. The next day, I received an anonymous envelope in my mailbox containing an official-looking document: Platinum Living's full acquisition strategy for Pinecrest Estates. It detailed plans to increase our HOA fees by 200% over 2 years, aggressively enforce violations to pressure certain homeowners, including me, to sell, and ultimately convert 30% of our single-family homes into high-density, luxury townhomes. The last page contained a handwritten note, "Choose your next move carefully." It wasn't signed, but I recognized Barbara's handwriting. That night, as our committee reviewed the document, Tom's phone rang. It was a board member from Willow Creek Estates, one of Platinum's previous acquisitions. Somehow they'd heard about our situation and wanted to help. Within hours, we had conference calls scheduled with residents from 3 different communities that had fallen to Platinum's tactics. Each had valuable insights about what had worked, what had failed, and what they wished they'd known before it was too late. With 9 days left before both our overlay zone application deadline and Platinum's hearing for control rights, our strategy evolved. We weren't just fighting for ourselves anymore. We were fighting for every community in Platinum's crosshairs. Everything was going according to plan until Wednesday morning when Tom Wilson called in a panic. They know what we're doing. Someone leaked our overlay zone application strategy. My heart sank. How do you know? Platinum just filed an emergency injunction to stop any city zoning changes affecting Pinecrest. They're claiming we're violating HOA procedures by seeking external governance without proper board approval. It was a clever move. While our current board fully supported the application, Platinum had found another technical violation to exploit. The injunction would delay our application beyond the deadline, effectively killing our strategy. Worse news followed that afternoon. 3 more Pinecrest homes had been purchased by Platinum subsidiaries through all-cash offers well above market value. This gave them control of 6 properties total, enough to trigger the special voting clause if they could delay our overlay zone application. Our committee gathered in Mrs. Chen's garden that evening, speaking in hushed tones among her rose bushes to avoid any potential surveillance. The mood was grim. "We need to face reality," Linda said quietly. "They have more resources, more legal leverage, and now more properties than we anticipated. The overlay zone was our best shot." Mrs. Chen looked around at her garden, which had once nearly cost her her antique furniture under Barbara's threats. "Perhaps it is time to accept what we cannot change." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "So we just give up? Let them take everything we've built?" Tom placed a hand on my shoulder. "Mike, you have a family to think about. We all do. Platinum has made it clear they'll target resistors first. Your kids have been through enough." His words hit home. Emma had just started sleeping through the night again after the trauma of seeing Barbara shove me last year. Jake was thriving, in school for the first time since we moved to Pinecrest. And Lily's health had finally stabilized. Was I really willing to put them through another battle that we might not win? Walking home alone, I felt a weight pressing down on me. The streetlights illuminated our neighborhood, the same streets that had once been Barbara's domain, then our community's shared space, and now were poised to become Platinum's corporate asset. I passed the community garden we'd planted together, the little free library we'd built, the playground we'd renovated. A year of work, of healing, of building something meaningful, and it could all be gone in 2 weeks. At home, I found Lily waiting up for me. One look at my face told her everything. "It's over, isn't it?" she asked softly. I nodded, throat tight. "I don't know how to fight them. They're too big, too powerful." She took my hands. "Then maybe we should start looking at other neighborhoods, places without HOAs." The idea of leaving Pinecrest felt like surrender, but also like relief. Maybe it was time to accept that some battles couldn't be won. The next morning, a Saturday, I woke to the sound of car doors slamming. Looking out our bedroom window, I saw 3 black SUVs parked in front of Tom Wilson's house. Men in suits were escorting Tom to one of the vehicles while his wife watched helplessly from their doorway. I ran outside in my pajamas. Tom, what's happening? One of the men intercepted me. Sir, please return to your residence. This doesn't concern you. But Tom called out, they're saying I falsified HOA financial records. It's nonsense, but they're taking me in for questioning. As the vehicles drove away, neighbors emerged from their homes confused and frightened. Tom's wife explained through tears that Platinum's lawyers had filed a criminal complaint against Tom, claiming he had embezzled HOA funds during his tenure as president. It was a blatant intimidation tactic, but an effective one. By targeting our HOA president with legal action, they had effectively paralyzed our leadership and sent a clear message to anyone else thinking of resisting. We can hurt you. Within hours, 2 more committee members received legal notices of their own. Linda for alleged ethics violations in accessing county records, and Mrs. Chen for supposed health code violations in her community garden. By nightfall, our resistance had crumbled. Tom was released but advised by his lawyer to step down from the HOA board immediately. Linda and Mrs. Chen both withdrew from our committee, fearful of further legal repercussions. I stood alone in my driveway as the sun set, watching neighbors hurry inside when they saw me, avoiding eye contact. No one wanted to be associated with the resistance anymore. No one wanted to be the next target. We had lost. In just 24 hours, Platinum Living had dismantled everything we'd built over the past year. Community had given way to fear once again, and I had no idea how to fix it. Sunday morning dawned with an eerie quiet over Pinecrest Estates. No children played in front yards, no neighbors chatted over fences. The community that had blossomed over the past year had retreated behind locked doors, blinds drawn. I sat at my kitchen table, staring at my laptop where I'd been drafting an email conceding defeat to Platinum Living. My family deserved peace. My neighbors needed this to end before more people got hurt. Then my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Playground, 20 minutes, come alone. Against Lily's protests, I went. The playground was empty except for a woman sitting on a bench, face hidden behind large sunglasses and a scarf. When I got closer, she removed them. Barbara Mitchell. You shouldn't be here, I said, looking around nervously. Neither should you if you're smart, she replied. But I'm guessing you never intended to be smart about this. I almost turned to leave, but something in her expression stopped me. Did you know they were going to go after Tom and the others? I asked. Barbara nodded grimly. It's phase 2 of their standard playbook. Identify community leaders, find or fabricate legal vulnerabilities, isolate them from supporters. I've seen it before. Why are you really helping us? What's your angle? She sighed, suddenly looking older than her years. When I lost everything last year, I had a lot of time to think. I built my business by exploiting this community, using people's fear of violations to profit off their possessions. I told myself it was just business. She gestured around the empty playground. But Platinum doesn't even pretend it's anything but exploitation. They'll strip mine this neighborhood until there's nothing left but profit margins. Even I wasn't that heartless. I studied her face, looking for deception but finding only regret. So what now? They've decimated our committee. The overlay zone. Application is blocked. They have enough properties to trigger the special voting rights. Not quite, Barbara said, leaning forward. They need those properties to be in good standing. No outstanding violations, no pending disputes. And that helps us how? A small smile played across her lips. Because I still know every bylaw of this HOA better than anyone. I wrote half of them, and I know exactly how to create legitimate, documented violations that would take weeks to resolve. I felt a glimmer of hope. You'd do that? Create violations on Platinum's properties? I already have, she replied. As of this morning, each of their properties has received notice of multiple serious covenant violations. all properly documented, all requiring formal hearings before they can be resolved. For the first time in days, I laughed, using their own tactics against them. But won't they just fix the violations? They can try, Barbara said, but I've cited Section 14, Paragraph 7, structural and aesthetic violations requiring board approval for remediation plans. With Tom stepping down, there's no active board to approve any remediation. It was clever, but not enough. That just delays them. We need something bigger. Barbara reached into her bag and pulled out a folder. That's why I brought this. The real charter of Pinecrest Estates, filed with the county in 1985. The version Platinum is using came from the developer's records, which were modified in 1987 during a dispute, but never properly filed with the county. I flipped through the documents, not understanding the legal implications. What does this mean? It means, Barbara said, her eyes gleaming with the same intensity I remembered from our confrontations a year ago, that the special voting clause they're relying on doesn't exist in the legally binding charter. It was added later without proper authorization. This was the break we needed, but with our committee disbanded and neighbors too frightened to act, how could we use it? Barbara seemed to read my thoughts. You united this neighborhood once before with community events. You need to do it again, but bigger, more visible, and with a purpose beyond just bringing people together. An idea began forming in my mind. A neighborhood assembly, I said slowly. Not an HOA meeting which would be subject to their injunctions, but a community gathering for homeowners to discuss the future of Pinecrest, completely separate from the HOA structure. Barbara nodded. Exactly. And while you're at it, invite the press. Invite the city council. Make it impossible for Platinum to shut down without creating exactly the kind of public relations nightmare they always avoid. Why would people come? They're scared. Because you'll protect them, Barbara said simply. By making this public, by bringing in outside witnesses, you create safety in numbers. Platinum thrives in shadows. Drag them into the light. I spent the rest of Sunday discreetly visiting key neighbors, starting with those I trusted most. Instead of asking them to join a resistance, I simply invited them to an important community discussion about Pinecrest's future. Each person, I convinced, reached out to others. By Monday morning, a text chain had formed among 30 households, nearly half our neighborhood. The assembly was set for Wednesday evening in the community park, strategically timed just before Platinum's Thursday hearing for control rights. Carlos from City Planning helped secure permits for our gathering as a cultural community event exempt from HOA regulation. Linda Peterson, though officially withdrawn from our committee, quietly reached out to local news outlets about covering a David versus Goliath story of homeowners fighting corporate takeover. Meanwhile, Barbara worked behind the scenes, filing additional documentation with the county to officially recognize the original charter as the legally binding version. She also submitted formal complaints about each violation on Platinum's properties, creating a paper trail that would be difficult to dismiss. By Tuesday, word of our assembly had spread throughout Pinecrest, but so had Platinum's response: formal, cease and desist letters to anyone involved in organizing the event, claiming it violated HOA regulations regarding public gatherings. This intimidation worked on some neighbors, who quickly withdrew their support. But it backfired with others, who saw these letters as proof of exactly what we were fighting against. Several recipients forwarded the letters to the press, generating preliminary coverage about corporate overreach in residential communities. Wednesday arrived with tension hanging over Pinecrest like storm clouds. That morning, two more things happened that changed everything. First, Tom Wilson was fully cleared of all allegations when his lawyer produced meticulous records of every HOA financial transaction during his tenure, proving the accusations were completely fabricated. This vindication made headlines in the local news, casting the first public shadow on Platinum's tactics. Second, Edward Granger himself arrived in Pinecrest, moving into one of their newly acquired properties with a team of lawyers and PR specialists. They began going door to door with a new approach, offering financial incentives to homeowners who would sign statements opposing our community assembly. Some neighbors accepted these offers out of fear or financial need. Others slammed doors. In their faces, the neighborhood was dividing, exactly as Platinum wanted. By late afternoon, I wasn't sure if anyone would show up to our assembly. My family helped set up chairs in the park, arranging them in a circle to emphasize equality and community. Lily prepared name tags. The kids distributed flyers we'd carefully worded to focus on positive community engagement rather than opposition to Platinum. At 5:30, 30 minutes before our scheduled start, the park remained empty except for my family and Barbara, who kept anxiously checking her phone. "No one's coming," I said, heart sinking. "They're too afraid." Barbara shook her head. "Give them time, people are cautious." By 5:45, 2 local news vans had arrived, setting up cameras with no community members to film. A reporter approached me, asking if the event had been canceled. I didn't know how to respond. Then at 5:55, something remarkable happened. Mrs. Chen appeared at the park entrance, dressed impeccably as always, supporting herself with her cane. Behind her came her entire extended family, children, grandchildren, neighbors from her previous neighborhood before Pinecrest, at least 20 people. "We stand with Pinecrest," she announced simply, taking a seat in our circle. Moments later, Tom Wilson arrived with his wife and a group of colleagues from his office, then Linda Peterson with county workers she'd befriended. Neighbors began arriving in groups of 3 or 4, safety in numbers, until nearly 100 people filled our chairs and spilled onto the grass beyond. Most surprising of all, the family, who had bought Barbara's old house, arrived with platters of food. "Community means sharing," the mother explained, setting up an impromptu refreshment table. By 6:15, over 2/3 of Pinecrest households were represented. The news cameras captured it all, a diverse group of homeowners united despite intimidation, gathering peacefully to determine their own future. I stepped into the center of the circle, overwhelmed by the turnout, but knowing what needed to be done. "Thank you all for coming tonight. A year ago, our neighborhood transformed from isolated households into a true community. Now that community is threatened, not by one person's rules, but by a corporation that sees our homes as nothing but profit centers." Murmurs of agreement spread through the crowd. "Tonight isn't about fighting or resistance," I continued. "It's about deciding together what kind of neighborhood we want to live in. Do we want corporate managers determining our way of life, or do we want to govern ourselves as neighbors and friends?" The response was immediate and overwhelming. Applause, cheers, calls of, "We govern ourselves." Edward Granger chose that moment to arrive, flanked by lawyers and PR people. He was tall, impeccably dressed, with the confident smile of someone accustomed to getting his way. The crowd parted as he approached the center of our circle. "Mr. Peterson," he said smoothly, "this is quite the gathering. Unfortunately, it violates several HOA regulations regarding public assemblies without proper approval." Before I could respond, Barbara Mitchell stepped forward. The crowd tensed. Many still remembered her as the villain in our neighborhood story. "Edward," she said calmly, "this assembly isn't subject to HOA regulations because it's not an HOA function. It's a community cultural gathering, properly permitted by the city." She held up the permit for cameras to see. Granger's smile tightened. "Nevertheless, Platinum Living has legal interest in this community, and we must insist—" "Your legal interest," Barbara interrupted, "is based on a charter document that was never properly filed with the county." She handed him a folder. "These are the certified county records confirming that the special voting rights clause you're attempting to exercise doesn't legally exist." Cameras zoomed in as Granger flipped through the documents, his expression darkening. One of his lawyers whispered urgently in his ear. Tom Wilson stepped forward next. Additionally, all 6 properties currently owned by Platinum subsidiaries have documented covenant violations that must be resolved before any voting rights can be exercised. He passed out copies of Barbara's meticulous violation reports to the press. Granger's confident facade cracked. These are delaying tactics. They change nothing. Perhaps not, Linda Peterson said, joining us with her own folder. But these might. County records showing that Platinum Living systematically violated fair housing practices in 3 other communities by selectively enforcing rules against certain demographic groups. The crowd murmured as reporters began taking notes and photos of the documents. Granger's face flushed with anger. You're making serious allegations without proof. We could sue each of you for defamation. You could, I agreed. Just like you falsely accused Tom Wilson of embezzlement. Just like you threatened Linda with ethics violations and Mrs. Chen with health code infractions. But now the whole world is watching. I gestured to the news cameras. How many lawsuits? Can you file before people start asking questions about your business practices? For a long moment, Granger stood silently calculating, looking from the documents to the cameras to the united community surrounding him. Finally, he forced a smile. Clearly, there have been misunderstandings on both sides. Perhaps we should step back and reassess our approach to Pinecrest Estates. It wasn't surrender, but it was retreat, and everyone knew it. As Granger and his entourage left the park, cameras following their exit, the community erupted in cautious celebration. We hadn't won yet, but for the first time since Platinum's threat emerged, we had fought back effectively. The assembly continued as planned, with neighbors sharing their visions for Pinecrest's future. Ideas flowed freely, expanded community gardens, educational workshops for children, support networks for elderly residents, and infrastructure improvements we could implement ourselves without waiting for HOA approval. By the end of the evening, we had formed a new committee, not to fight Platinum, but to strengthen our community regardless of who controlled the HOA. This time, the committee included 20 volunteers from across the neighborhood, ensuring no single point of vulnerability for corporate intimidation. As people began to disperse, carrying a renewed sense of purpose and unity, Barbara Mitchell approached me one last time. "You've done well," she said quietly, "better than I did when I ran this place." "We're not there yet," I reminded her. Platinum could still find another angle of attack. She nodded. "They will. People like Granger don't give up easily, but neither do people like you, apparently." She glanced around at the community, still buzzing with energy and purpose. I never understood what I was really destroying when I enforced my rules. I thought power came from control. And now? She gestured to the dispersing crowd, neighbors helping each other pack up chairs, sharing leftover food, making plans for tomorrow. Now I see that real power comes from connection. You built something I never could, even with all my rules and fines. As Barbara walked away, melting into the evening shadows, just as she had appeared that morning, I realized something important. Our strength had never come from fighting against Barbara or Platinum. It had come from fighting for each other, for the community we wanted to create. The real revolution wasn't about defeating enemies. It was about building something worth protecting in the first place. The following morning, Platinum Living withdrew their application for control rights over Pinecrest Estates less than 2 hours before the scheduled hearing. Their press release cited community dynamics that require further assessment before proceeding with management services. Translation: they weren't prepared for a neighborhood that fought back together. The lawsuit against individual homeowners disappeared as quietly as it had appeared, with no formal dismissal, but no further legal action. Barbara's documentation about the invalid charter clause was officially recognized by the county, closing the loophole Platinum had tried to exploit. Within weeks, 5 of the 6 properties Platinum had purchased were listed for sale again. The 6th became a rental, managed at a distance with minimal HOA involvement. Edward Granger never returned to Pinecrest Estates. Our victory made the local news, then regional, then national. Other communities facing similar corporate takeovers reached out for advice. Our neighborhood assembly model was replicated in HOAs across the state, creating networks of homeowners sharing resources and strategies to maintain local control of their communities. But the most profound changes happened within Pinecrest itself. The temporary unity of crisis evolved into permanent structures of mutual support. The committee of 20 volunteers formalized into subcommittees focusing on different aspects of community life, from maintenance to social events, from welcoming new neighbors to supporting elderly residents. Barbara Mitchell never moved back to Pinecrest, but she remained in touch, occasionally offering advice on HOA regulations or warning us about new corporate strategies targeting residential communities. Her knowledge, once used to control us, now helped protect neighborhoods across the region. As for my family, we stayed in our home, now part of a community stronger than any HOA could regulate or any corporation could buy. Emma and Jake grew up understanding that community isn't just where you live, it's how you live together. Lily's health continued to improve with the support network we'd built. Last weekend, exactly 2 years after Barbara first shut down our garage sale, Pinecrest Estates held its annual Community Day, a neighborhood-wide celebration where every driveway became a sharing center for free items, skills, stories, and food. No forms required, no violations issued, no corporate oversight needed. The revolution we started with a simple garage sale had come full circle, transforming not just our neighborhood, but our understanding of what home really means. It's not just the houses we own or the rules we follow. It's the connections we build and the community we create together. Sometimes the best revenge against those who would divide us isn't fighting back. It's coming together so strongly that division becomes impossible. And sometimes the most valuable things we possess aren't the items we sell or save, but the community we build around them. The information in this video is for informational and entertainment purposes only. HOA rules and laws vary by state and community.